Alright, welcome. If you're tuning into this, you're looking for the video on AP Free Responses, the basics from A to Z. Initially being recorded as a review item for my AP English for seniors, but it's designed also as an introduction for future classes and anybody that really just wants information on completing the AP Free Responses for AP English 4 or AP English Literature. So, here are the basics. We have 3 essays in AP Lit. We have the Q1, which is a poetry-based analysis, a Q2, which is prose-based, and a Q3, which is novel-based. Qs 1 and 2 deal with small sections of literature. 1 deals with a poem, and 2 deals with an excerpt or passage. And Q3 deals with the entire literary work. Qs 1 and 3 deal with theme and how it's executed. Q2 deals with tone. And all of the questions focus on author's purpose as the heart of the argument. It's really not all that complicated. The Q1 and 3 are theme. It's looking at the overall impact on the story's ability to project its message. Q2 is all about tone. How does it impact mood? How does it impact the feel of the story? There are some minimums. First, at minimum, you must master writing 4 paragraphs for each essay with only 40 minutes for the paper. This is true 100% for the Q1 and the Q2. For the Q3, I am going to advocate writing a total of 5 paragraphs. Here's why. In the case of the Q1 and the Q2, you're going to be working with a short piece of literature. So let's say this little laser measures the size of a piece, and I'm going to go down for the smaller ones. They deal with small little pieces, little chunks of text, poems, a short story excerpt, a couple of lines, a couple of paragraphs from a novel. These pieces are going to ask you to be looking at literary devices, specific lit devices, or lit devices of your own choosing, and they're going to ask you to map out how those lit devices are in play within each of the pieces. For the Q1, you're going to look at how it's in play to execute the theme, and for Q2, how it's in play to execute the tone. These pieces are relatively short, so you're not going to be needing 3 body paragraphs to be able to have a conversation about the development of theme and all throughout a novel or something like that, which the Q3 has. But you're going to have to show an example of each tool or device that you're using being used a couple of times within the entire work. You can't just say you see, for instance, imagery once. You need to show the imagery is present throughout the piece. So 2 examples of imagery, preferably one towards the onset of the story and one towards the end. And then you wind up copying the exact same procedure over and all into the next body paragraph, doing another lit device, say diction, and then another sample diction, and one from the front, one from the back of the piece. Those are going to be really big paragraphs. We're going to talk about paragraphing in a minute itself and structures once we get through the intro and the thesis, but those are going to be big paragraphs. So you don't need more than 2 of those because you're going to do the job that you need to within that space. For the Q3, you're dealing with, instead of a small little piece, you're dealing with a long piece. You've got the whole piece of literature that you're studying. So you've got to be able to talk about, and they're going to give you some sort of idea that the writer of the question has come up with that you need to explore, and how that idea impacts the theme of the story. So they're going to give you a tool, and you're going to talk about how it impacts theme. You have to do that through 3 parts of the story: beginning, middle, end. These pieces are not organized based upon the tool. They're based upon impact of theme throughout the novel. So if you're going to look at it, those paragraphs are going to be shorter because they're going to have one example of the theme working in the beginning, one working in the middle, and one working in the end, and they're going to explore them in that way. So it shows how the overall theme of the story, the overall message of the story, is developed by the use of this tool. So you need shorter paragraphs, but that means you need more. So as we go through, you're going to learn how to actually write these, along with intros or conclusions. And basically strengthen everything up. So let's move on. So for your introduction, it's pretty straightforward. If you're used to a history course at this particular point, you're probably used to a thesis sentence and moving on. That's history. English, we like things to be flowing at the beginning. We like something to lead us in, something to hook our attention. Remember those attention-getting hooks and all that you had for perhaps STAR or some similar state exam? Same thing. So our first sentence is going to include the author's first and last name, as long as we remember it. If you don't, leave that out. Don't make it up. Title of the novel, poem or passage, and some sort of thematic idea about the novel. This isn't your thesis. It might read something like, John Irving's A Prayer for Owen Meany explores the coming of age of two boys in the late 1960s, struggling to find the answer to life's most challenging questions of fate and faith. Kind of reads like a movie trailer, doesn't it? In a world beset by upset standards. Same type of concept. We're bringing the person into it. Next, a couple of ideas you can put in before you get to the thesis. You could have the introduction talk about the setting, or talk about the presence of major characters if that component's important to it. But it's not a guarantee that we're actually going to focus on those. So the next piece, and all that needs to be mentioned, is that the responses are not reader response essays. We're not going to be talking about the impact on the reader, what they feel, what they think, or anything of that sort. We're going to make certain that the essays are absent of those components. Putting that in will actually bring the score down, so we're not going to use them. And it's good practice kind of to use reader response framing for the why component, which we'll talk about in the body paragraphs, but it's not a requirement. It's just something and all that you can choose to do. So, first component up of the introduction after starting it is, of course, getting to the thesis statement, which is the meat and potatoes of writing the essay. So the thesis should contain a clear focus. It should be an argument that relates to the work as a whole. For Q1 and Q3, you're talking about theme, and Q2, you're talking about tone. The thesis doesn't have to use the literary devices mentioned in the prompt. That being said, go ahead and mention the lit devices. If you have the lit devices present, or the tool that you're exploring, it'll anchor your paper so that you make certain you discuss everything you need to, while at the same time it ensures that your reader understands what they're supposed to be evaluating. For the body paragraphing, we're going to follow simple structure. First, topic sentence. The topic sentence should contain keywords from the thesis. As you see, each of these points go back to that. It should list what the argument is, and what lit device you're exploring within that paragraph, or what tool. So in the case of a Q1, you would focus on how the individual tool you're going to look at in this body paragraph impacts overall theme in the poem. Note, the topic sentence does not say include a quotation. You're not going to include a quotation with the topic sentence. If you've done that in the past, that's bad writing. That's just bad altogether. You need to make them separate. Topic sentences stand alone. The textual evidence, the evidence that backs up your claim, comes later in the process. As we can see here. AEC, assertion, argument. This is your topic sentence. The evidence example is your quotation that comes from the source that you have in front of you, your text evidence, and then you have commentary, which consists of two parts, how and why. Where most AP students get tripped up is the commentary component. It's not detailed enough to be able to actually explain what's going on within the sample and its connection to the assertion. It's shortchanged, and when you shortchange it, you're not going to get the passing score you need. So let's talk about the two components, how, why. How is where you actually take the time to explain how the tool is impacting theme in the quotation, or is impacting tone in the quotation, depending on which essay you're writing. You can't just say it impacts it. You have to explain how. Map it out so that a layman could understand it and be able to follow along without any problems. If you don't do this, then what happens is your argument's never being made. It's never being established. You're not bringing the reader to the point that they understand your thinking. Remember, writing is all about the illusion of control. We want the writer to feel like they have control in the thinking process, but we are doing the thinking for them. If you don't have a thorough how, you're not doing your job. Why is where you usually have reader response as a training wheel that can be used. You can use something like the author's purpose in this is to impact the audience in this way or impact the audience in that way. And you remove the trading while just getting rid of the phrase the audience. Why literally is a construct of why is the author doing what they're doing? What is their hope and all of how that particular tool is going to impact and that impact on the theme is going to work and all for people that read. It could be a case of how it actually plays into understanding, comprehension, how it plays into the rhetorical effect of the piece. There's a lot of different options that you have for it. Now, a couple of things about this. Let's talk about total amounts of sentences. So we've got the topic sentence. That I'm not going to count my total that I'm fixing to count out. Whenever we do our piece of evidence, we're going to have an example. That's one sentence. How. That's two sentences for every one sentence of evidence, and then 2 sentences of why. That's a total of 5 sentences for each example. In the case of a Q1 or a Q2, that means you're going to have approximately 12 sentences in each body paragraph. In the case of a Q3, you're going to have a total of 7. Topic sentence, 5, concluding for 1 and 2. Topic sentence, 5, concluding for 3. And that's really how it kind of plays out. Here are some added tips and all that'll be on the slide for a second. Be sure to always introduce your quote with a single sentence. You've got to lead into it. Don't just throw a quote in there. Make certain you choose the best words, phrases, when you're talking. That includes both the quotation itself and the words that you put on the paper. Be sure you follow your quote with the commentary analysis. You've got the 1-to-2 ratio there, and it should also explain how your quote and your devices connect to the argument in your topic sentence. You gotta actually, have a conversation. So the body paragraphs will do this. We're pretty much covered in all this. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. If you want to pause on this, you can look at it. The concluding paragraph should not just merely restate the thesis. You pull the keywords and all from the thesis and all that you had in the introduction, rephrase it a little bit, and then make that exact same argument and all as the first sentence of the conclusion. Then you have to make a choice. You can't just end the piece and all with some sort of how do you feel or what do you think. You're going to need to actually make the conclusion based upon something a little bit more realistic, something more solid. So here are some options. Wrap up the conclusion with a statement of world significance. Answer the question, what do we learn about the state of the world through this analysis? Societal significance. What do we learn about human nature? About family systems, structures. Personal significance. How do the characters teach us about ourselves? Political significance. Cultural significance. Gender racial significance. Language significance. You've got plenty of options here that all apply to it. If you want to be successful in the AP exam, it boils down simply to this. If you've not written this way in the past, if you've fought common, simple ways of writing in the past, it's time to stop. Because next year, even if you don't get the credit from this, or even if you do, you're going to meet the reality that writing without the development of the hows and the whys that I've just gone through require. You're going to realize the reality that without that information, without that development, without that information, you're going to fail at writing. And when you fail at writing, you're going to fail at college. You're all way too smart, way too capable to do that. But you're going to have to make the choice. Do I stay stubborn and write my way, which may not be the best? Or do I finally adapt? Do I finally grow? And do I finally conquer? Follow the steps within this particular video, and you'll succeed. Look at the AP scores that you're after. You'll pass. You'll have the pride and all of having done well, and your writing in college will be impacted for it. That concludes my little chat, and thanks for listening.